Home Pong. In 1975, Atari took a gamble that would define the home gaming market. Up until then, video games were mostly something you'd find in arcades, but Atari wanted to bring that experience into living rooms. Partnering with Sears, they released Home Pong exclusively for the retailer's holiday catalog. It wasn't the first home console. Magnavox Odyssey had launched a few years earlier, but it was the first one to truly feel polished. The unit was self-contained, with controllers built right into the console, meaning no complicated setup or interchangeable cartridges. All it did was play Pong, but it did it well. The magic was in the technology. Atari's engineers created a custom chip that made the gameplay smoother and the visuals cleaner than anything else at the time. Simple knob controls made it instantly approachable, even for people who had never touched a video game. Sears sold the units under the Telegames brand, and the demand quickly outstripped supply that first holiday season. By early 1976, Atari was producing more to keep up with the craze. Home Pong proved there was a real market for dedicated home gaming devices and helped lead to Warner Communications' 1976 acquisition of Atari, which provided the funding to develop the more ambitious Atari Video Computer System, later known as the 2600. Without that boost, the cartridge-based console revolution might have taken much longer to arrive. Atari 2600. When the Atari 2600 launched in September 1977, originally under the name Atari Video Computer System, it didn't just build on the success of Home Pong, it rewrote the rules of home gaming. Instead of a single built-in game, the 2600 used interchangeable cartridges, allowing players to swap experiences at will. This idea was groundbreaking. The console launched with titles like Combat and Air-Sea Battle, but within a couple of years, the library exploded thanks to both Atari and third-party developers. Technically, the 2600 was a marvel for its time. Its joystick controller with a single red button became an icon, and its wood grain paneling gave it a home-friendly, almost furniture-like appearance. While the early years were slow, partly because people weren't used to paying for multiple games, blockbusters like Space Invaders in 1980 changed everything, boosting console sales and helping video games become a mainstream hobby. By the early 80s, the 2600 was the best-selling console in the world, with millions of units in households. But its open development environment also led to an influx of low-quality games, culminating in the 1983 video game crash. Even so, the 2600's design, library, and cultural impact made it the blueprint for every cartridge-based system that followed. Without it, the console market might have collapsed entirely. Atari 5200. By 1982, Atari was riding high on the 2600's success, but competition from the Intellivision and ColecoVision was heating up fast. The answer was the Atari 5200, marketed as a next-generation leap with improved graphics, more colors, and better sound. It was a powerhouse, essentially a repurposed Atari computer under the hood. In practice though, it struggled right out of the gate. One of the 5200's biggest talking points was its non-centering analog joystick, which promised more precise control. The reality? It was fragile, prone to drifting, and notorious for breaking down. To make matters worse, the 5200 wasn't backward compatible with the massive library of 2600 games, at least not without a bulky adapter released later. Many early adopters felt burned, especially given the system's high price and limited launch library. Even with solid titles like Super Breakout and Pac-Man, the 5200 failed to capture the same magic as its predecessor. The looming 1983 video game crash didn't help, as retailers grew wary of overstocking consoles. By 1984, Atari had quietly discontinued the 5200 in favor of the more cost-effective 7800. Today, it's remembered less for its games and more as an example of how quickly dominance in the console market can slip away. Atari 7800. The Atari 7800's journey to store shelves is one of the strangest in console history. Announced and test-marketed in 1984 as the planned successor to the 5200, it was designed to compete directly with the ColecoVision and Nintendo's soon-to-arrive Famicom. Atari even produced units for a limited regional release, but corporate turmoil and the company's sale later that year put the launch on hold. For nearly 2 years, the 7800 sat in warehouses, ready to go but stuck in limbo. When it finally launched nationwide in May 1986, the industry had already shifted. Nintendo's NES was dominating the market, and Sega's Master System was also making moves. Still, the 7800 had some real advantages. It was backward compatible with the 2600's massive library right out of the box, and it could handle far more advanced graphics than the 2600 or 5200. Launch titles like Pole Position 2 and arcade hits such as Galaga and Miss Pac-Man showed promise. Unfortunately, Atari's marketing budget was tiny compared to Nintendo's, and third-party support dried up quickly due to exclusive licensing deals elsewhere. While it managed a modest run into the early 90s, the 7800 never came close to reclaiming Atari's former glory. It's remembered as a capable underdog that simply came too late to the fight. What was your favorite Atari console? Let me know in the comments below. Atari XE game system. By 1987, Atari was looking for ways to leverage its existing technology without spending big on new hardware development. The result was the Atari XE game system, essentially an Atari 65XE home computer repackaged as a cartridge-based console. The idea was to appeal to both gamers and aspiring computer users, play games out of the box, or plug in a keyboard and use it like a personal computer. Design-wise, the XEGS had a light, pastel color scheme that matched Atari's XE computer line, making it stand out from the darker, sleeker consoles of the time. It launched with titles like Missile Command and Flight Simulator 2, and thanks to its compatibility with hundreds of Atari 8-bit computer games, it had a surprisingly large library right away. It even came with a light gun for titles like Big Hunt. The problem was timing. By 1987, the NES had locked down much of the US market, and Sega was pushing the Master System. The hybrid console computer concept also confused consumers. Most buyers either wanted a dedicated gaming console or a full computer, not both in one package. The XEGS quietly faded out by the end of the decade, but it remains a quirky footnote in Atari's history for its unusual 2-in-1 pitch. Atari Lynx. In 1989, Atari took aim at the booming handheld market dominated by Nintendo's Game Boy. Their weapon? The Atari Lynx, a color, backlit handheld with hardware far ahead of its time. Developed in partnership with Epix, the Lynx boasted a powerful 16-bit graphics processor, scaling and rotation effects, and the ability to be held in either orientation, making it friendly for left-handed players. It made the monochrome Game Boy look ancient. The Lynx launched on September 1, 1989, alongside titles like Blue Lightning and California Games. Its vivid color screen and arcade-style games impressed early adopters, and its Comlinks cable allowed up to 8 systems to connect for multiplayer matches, something unheard of in handheld gaming at the time. But there were problems. The Lynx was expensive, bulkier than the Game Boy, and its battery life was bad, often draining 6 AA batteries in under 5 hours. Nintendo's cheaper, more portable Game Boy also had a stronger third-party lineup, and it didn't take long for the Lynx to fall behind in sales. Still, the Lynx carved out a small, loyal fanbase and earned a reputation as one of the most technically advanced handhelds of the era. It showed Atari could innovate, just not always in ways the mass market was ready for. Atari Jaguar. By late 1993, Atari was desperate to reclaim relevance in a market dominated by Sega and Nintendo. Their answer was the Atari Jaguar, marketed as the world's first 64-bit console, a bold claim meant to leapfrog the 16-bit SNES and Sega Genesis. In reality, its architecture was a complex mix of processors, and developers often struggled to tap into its full potential. The Jaguar launched on November 23, 1993, in select US test markets, with a wider rollout in 1994. It debuted with titles like Cybermorph and Trevor McFur in the Crescent Galaxy, but the real excitement came later with games such as Tempest 2000 and Alien vs. Predator. The controller, however, became infamous, large with a full keypad that many players found awkward. Atari's marketing promised cutting-edge experiences, but the small library and steep learning curve for developers limited the system's appeal. Sony's PlayStation and Sega Saturn, both arriving in 1994 and 95, quickly overshadowed it with larger libraries and stronger third-party support. By 1996, the Jaguar was discontinued, marking Atari's exit from the mainstream console business. Despite its commercial failure, it has since gained a cult following, with homebrew developers still creating games for it decades later. It's remembered as a bold last stand for Atari in the traditional console market. Atari Flashback. In 2004, Atari decided to tap into nostalgia rather than compete directly in the modern console wars. The result was the Atari Flashback, a plug-and-play system preloaded with classic games. Shaped like a miniature Atari 7800, the first Flashback contained 20 built-in titles, some original 2600 and 7800 classics, others newly developed to mimic the old-school style. Unlike the original consoles, it used modern hardware emulation and connected directly to TVs via composite cables, making setup quick and painless. While the first Flashback received mixed reviews due to inaccuracies in game emulation, it sold well enough to spawn an entire product line. Models improved significantly, with the Flashback 2 in 2005 even using hardware so authentic that enthusiasts could modify it to accept real Atari cartridges. Later iterations added more games, wireless controllers, and HDMI output, making them a hit with casual gamers and collectors alike. The success of the Flashback series showed Atari could still leverage its brand without massive R&D costs. Instead of trying to outgun Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo, they embraced their retro identity and found a profitable niche. Today, The flashback remains one of the most recognizable plug-and-play systems, keeping Atari's legacy alive for new generations. Atari VCS. After years of absence from the mainstream console market, Atari surprised everyone in 2017 by announcing a brand new system, the modern Atari VCS. Inspired by the wood grain design of the classic 2600 but built with modern hardware, the VCS aimed to be part retro console, part mini PC, and part streaming device. Crowdfunded through Indiegogo, it promised a mix of preloaded classic Atari games, new indie titles, and full PC functionality via a custom Linux-based OS. The road to launch was rocky. Multiple delays pushed back its release, and skeptics questioned whether Atari could compete in a market dominated by Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. Backers finally began receiving their units in December 2020, with a retail launch on June 15, 2021. The system featured both a retro-style joystick and a modern gamepad, plus the ability to install other operating systems for added versatility. Despite its sleek design and nostalgic appeal, the modern VCS faced challenges: a high price point, a small game library, and competition from cheaper, more established gaming and streaming options. While it didn't make a major splash in the industry, it carved out a niche among retro enthusiasts and stands as Atari's most ambitious hardware project in decades. Unreleased consoles. Not every Atari console made it to store shelves. Some were ambitious prototypes, others were bold experiments that never escaped the planning stage. One of the most famous was the Atari 2700, a wireless version of the 2600 revealed around 1981. It featured sleek, futuristic controllers that used radio signals instead of cords, ahead of its time, but the risk of interference with other electronics made it too problematic to release. Then there was the Atari Cosmos, a tabletop handheld from 1981 that used holographic images layered over simple LED gameplay. Atari publicly displayed it at trade shows and even created marketing materials, but production was canceled before a single unit shipped, likely due to cost concerns and limited gameplay potential. Finally, the Atari Panther was intended as a 32-bit follow-up to the 7800 and Lynx in the early 90s. Development was well underway, but Atari scrapped it in favor of focusing resources on the Jaguar, which they believed would be more competitive in the next-gen race. These unreleased systems are now legendary among collectors, representing what could have been moments in gaming history. While they never hit the market, their concepts showed Atari was always experimenting, even if not every gamble paid off. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below.